Greetings everybody, Dragon here, and this might trigger some people from the Assassin's Creed community, but here it goes. I think that Assassin's Creed Valhalla is the best Assassin's Creed game to date, gameplay wise. Now, before I start, I'll give a summary of the story for this iteration. If you're familiar with this franchise, you know that the Assassin's Creed games usually have two main storylines. One that happens in modern times and the other that happens in the past. At some point throughout the multiple installments, a third plot was added, that being the story for the Isu/First Civilization. In this game we have three storylines, the first one following the character named Layla, and as usual it involves searching for Isu technology/artifacts that could help their modern civilization, no surprise there. The second one follows the character named Eivor Varinsson, a Norseman living in the Viking Age. His story starts when he was a child as a rival chieftain murdered his parents in front of him, leaving him as an orphan. Luckily, an allied clan took him in and their chieftain adopted Eivor as his own. Years later, Eivor manages to take revenge for his parents by murdering the rival chieftain that slew them. But throughout his quest, a dormant part within himself was awoken, and suddenly he started having visions of Odin the Allfather. After the death of his sworn enemy, Eivor finds out that his adopted father was swearing allegiance to Harald Fairhair, the upcoming king of Norway, as well as giving up dominion over his lands, thing that bothered the chieftain's biological son, Sigurd. Eivor, knowing that he wouldn't be satisfied as the lackey of an unknown king, decides to leave Norway and travel to England with his adopted brother Sigurd and a small portion of his clan. Throughout these events, Eivor meets and loosely allies himself with the Hidden Ones, yet he refuses to join their brotherhood. In England, Eivor and the Raven clan start making a name for themselves while allying themselves with different rulers and people of influence in the land. While all of this is going on, Eivor continues to uncover the mystery of his recent connection with the god Odin. Ultimately, Eivor manages to carve a place for himself and his clan into England, while discovering the truth about his visions. The final story of the game involves the First Civilization. Thanks to one of the Hidden Ones named Basim, Eivor manages to discover how he is in fact the reincarnation of the Isu named Odin, and how the knowledge of the Allfather might be of use to him if he is willing to give up his autonomy. While this happened, we also discover that Basim is the reincarnation of the Isu Loki, and Sigurd, his adopted brother, was previously the Isu Tyr. They then enter into conflict with Basim, that is trying to carry out his revenge on the Allfather for what he did to him in their previous life. This ends up being pretty vague as we don't fully know what actually happened, besides some hints based on the old stories and myths. Regardless, Eivor manages to defeat Basim by imprisoning him, and also rejects the Allfather's help in order to maintain his free will. Later on, we find out that this wasn't the end of Eivor's connection with his previous life, but now instead of rejecting Odin and the High One trying to take control over Eivor, they find a middle ground and try to mutually help each other while trying to coexist in harmony. Now, let's start with the gameplay. In this iteration, the mechanics can be summarized in four specific groups: stealth, combat, movement, and recreative. For stealth, we have assassinations, crouching, blending in, and hiding. The last one is the simplest and the one most fans are familiar with. You can hide in tall grass, piles of leaves or hay, underwater for a limited time, sitting on benches, and on top of buildings. Although the last one is a bit of a pseudo hiding place, as if you are detected, you can be followed there. While the other options do completely conceal your presence as long as you aren't seen while entering them. There is also the new ability to blend in, that allows you to perform tasks as a way to disguise yourself. All of these can be used to escape pursuers as long as they are first checking off your tail. Even though they will still be looking for you, if you remain hidden, they will eventually lose interest, and you can continue moving freely. Alongside escaping enemies, you can also blend in with the environment. You can, as I said, perform a task like making bread, simply sit on a bench, or in certain spots you can blend in with crowds, whether it be by walking alongside monks or dancing/drinking with a crowd of common folk. These are mainly used to go unnoticed and gather information. There is also the unique skill added for this game, that being the donning your hooded cloak. This takes the place of the previous ability to blend in crowds passively. I also have to mention that blending in is now performed manually, as you must trigger the action, unlike before that you just approach crowds to blend in. For the final section of stealth, we have assassinations. This is probably the one they changed the least. as you can perform assassinations while hiding, air assassinations, ledge assassinations, corner assassinations, or just running assassination, although this last one normally ends up with you being detected. You can also lure enemies into positions to perform said assassinations, or use range attacks to kill targets in the distance, but normally this alerts enemies. Also, you can complement the stealth with powers you can discover and unlock throughout the story and throughout the map. Next, there is the combat. It mainly builds off from what was established in Origins and Odyssey, but more polished and with more variety in weapons. There is the hand-to-hand combat and ranged combat. Both can be used in a variety of ways, from knives all the way to great axes, dual wielding, using a shield, or going one-handed. For bows, you have three choices. Predator bow, which gives you a first-person perspective and allows you to make long-distance shots. The hunting bow, which gives you half the range but also is easier to use in combat and stealth. And the last one being light bow, which allows you to do rapid fire and is mainly used in combat. Here again, the combat is complemented with powers. Then there is movement. There is parkour or free running, mounts, small boats, and the longship. Here free running has become very lackluster as there aren't many places to parkour around for most of the map. Still, you can climb up and down almost every surface and structure for decent mobility throughout the world. For mounts and small boats, they are the main form of transportation in the map, as paths and rivers make them easy to use, plus having the auto travel option allows you to focus on other things while you move from point A to point B. Lastly, there is the longship, which not only allows you to travel through rivers, but also gives you the option to raid settlements, or places of value to acquire treasure, riches, and building materials for your settlement. Although it's not really that useful outside of raiding, and is not fully exploited until the Raver raiding DLC. But for traveling purpose, it does get the job done. Finally, we have recreative minigames, coming in the form of table games, fishing, and stacking stones. These all have a bit of a practical function as you can use them to acquire items, experience, and information. But besides that, they subjectively aren't the best part of the game. I'm sure some will find them very enjoyable, but for me, they mainly become tedious tasks in order to complete the game. With this out of the way, now I can tell you why I think this iteration is the best one so far. In my opinion, Assassin's Creed has always been a stealth game at its core. I know some love the parkour, and I won't argue the fact that it became an iconic part of the game, but for me, the best thing about this franchise was sneaking around and performing assassinations, and this game truly achieves the best form for this. The stealth feels challenging yet not impossible, like in Odyssey. Assassinations feel satisfying to perform, and strategizing to perform them is truly a delight. Although it's not perfect, as for whatever reason they decided that, unlike in Odyssey and Origins, the bird tracking system should be solely for scouting and nothing more. You can't mark enemies, which makes this ability almost completely useless. Thankfully, in Mirage they restored the bird's functions fully, and can be extremely useful in that game. There's also the fact that for whatever reason they added a smoke bomb power in a DLC, but they also decided to make it explosive, meaning that if your target is near a torch or fire, it will blow them to Kingdom Come, which is annoying to say the least, more so because there was already an explosive arrow option, so not only it becomes hard to use, but also redundant. Another thing that would have been better is if the blending in system was polished a bit more. As I mentioned before, you now can blend in by donning your hooded cloak, but this only works to stay undetected in semi-restricted areas. Not to mention that since they added the performing of activities as a form of blending in, you no longer can just walk to a group of people and start blending in. You have to manually find a specific place and trigger it, which isn't too bad, but it could have been way better. Like if they left the passive blending with crowds and added the performing activities in order to complement this mechanic rather than replacing it. I guess thematically, since you aren't really an assassin, this makes sense, as maybe someone that just casually picks up these skills wouldn't be that proficient or elegant with them, but it does become a bit tedious if you're trying to escape enemies by performing a task, since you have to manually trigger it. Regardless, at least it went into the right direction, because in Odyssey, since assassinations didn't always work with high-level enemies, you sometimes had to give up and start fighting, so trying to fully sneak around was almost impossible, more so if you wanted to clean up a location that way. Now, the biggest problem this game has is how it isn't an Assassin's Creed game, as in you don't feel any necessity to sneak around and assassinate enemies. Unlike previous games that gave you side objectives to at least endorse a stealthier approach to the game, since Odyssey this completely disappeared. There is no reason to sneak around because the game doesn't really punishes you or rewards you for doing it. So it becomes more of a slower option rather than the most logical one, at least context-wise. Hell, since they took a more stereotypical Viking approach to the game, it almost feels like you shouldn't even try to sneak around. Like, for what I understand, raids in the Viking Age were more about sneaking around and stealing while being undetected, unlike the first raids the Norsemen ever did. But they didn't take advantage of this historical fact, which is ironic. So the game truly separates itself from what it's supposed to be, a stealth game. Despite this, to me Assassin's Creed Valhalla is really the epitome of the franchise. The only problem being how it isn't what it's supposed to be. Regardless, at least Mirage does try to go back to what the games were supposed to be, although not perfectly if you ask me, as Mirage really doesn't take advantage of good concepts and mechanics introduced in Valhalla, like the donning of the hood when you wanted to blend in and disappear in plain sight, or its superior combat system, so it ends up being a bit of a hit or miss. And yeah, that's about it. Hope you enjoyed the video, hope to see your thoughts in the comments, and I hope to see you next time.
We take this
Goodbye.
to your chamber.